The first Council ship exploded 17 seconds after the battle began. The humans had remembered exactly where to hit them. Grace Norton commanded from the bridge of the Remembrance, her hands steady on the controls, her mind clear and focused. Around her, the human fleet moved with precision that should have been impossible. They broke into small groups and attacked from multiple directions. They targeted engines and weapon systems. They created chaos where the Council expected order. The Council commander tried to respond. He ordered his ships to concentrate fire on the human flagship. But the Remembrance was already moving, slipping between enemy vessels, using their own allies as shields. Every time the Council adjusted their tactics, the humans adapted faster. Samuel Gray watched from Earth, tracking every movement on his screens. He spoke into his communicator, feeding information to the fleet, coordinating attacks, identifying weaknesses. He had spent 40 years preparing for war. Now he understood what he had really been preparing for. The Council ships were larger and better armed. They had energy shields that should have blocked anything the humans could throw at them. They had weapons that could destroy a city with a single shot. But they were slow. They were predictable. They had not fought a real war in 2,000 years, and it showed. The humans had remembered how to fight. They had remembered that war was not about bigger ships or stronger weapons. It was about will. It was about determination. It was about refusing to lose no matter what the odds. Kira Solon worked in the engineering bay of the Remembrance, shouting commands to human technicians who barely understood her language. She had shown them the weaknesses in Council technology, the flaws that had never been fixed because no one had ever exploited them. Now those flaws were tearing the Council fleet apart. A group of enemy ships broke through the human lines and headed straight for Earth. Grace saw them on her screen and felt cold fear grip her heart. If they reached the planet, millions would die. She gave orders without hesitation. 3 human ships broke off from the main battle and moved to intercept. They were outnumbered 5-1. They did not slow down. The lead pilot was a woman named Rachel Torres. She had undergone the awakening procedure 2 months ago. She had remembered being a commander in the ancient war, leading squadrons against impossible odds. She had remembered dying in a battle just like this one, sacrificing herself so others could survive. She was not afraid to do it again. Her ship hit the first Council vessel at full speed. The explosion took out 2 more. The remaining enemy ships scattered, their formation broken, their advance stopped. Rachel Torres did not survive, but Earth was saved. Varath watched the battle from the Council flagship and felt something he had not felt in 2,000 years. Shame. He had helped create this moment. He had helped steal humanity's future. And now he was watching his own people die because they refused to admit they had been wrong. He made a decision. He walked to the communication center and pushed aside the officer on duty. He opened a channel to every ship in the fleet, Council and human alike. "This is Elder Vorath," he said. "I am the eldest member of the Council. I was present when the decision was made to erase humanity 2,000 years ago. I helped plan it. I helped execute it. And I have spent every day since then knowing that it was the greatest crime our civilization has ever committed." The Council commander screamed at him to stop. Vorath ignored him. "I invoke my authority as elder," he continued. "I order an immediate ceasefire. I acknowledge the crime committed against humanity. I call upon all ships loyal to justice to stand down immediately." Half the Council fleet stopped firing. Their captains were old enough to remember the authority of an elder, the sacred trust that bound them to obey. The younger captains, those loyal to the current Council leadership, continued their attack. The battle split in 2. Council ships began fighting Council ships. The humans watched in confusion as their enemies turned on each other. Grace saw the opportunity and took it. She ordered her fleet to focus on the ships that were still hostile. With half the council fleet standing down, the odds had shifted dramatically. What had been 30 against 300 was now 30 against 150, with another 150 refusing to fight. The hostile council ships tried to regroup. Their commander screamed orders that no one followed. His authority was crumbling around him. His fleet was tearing itself apart. Daniel Marsh stood in the broadcast center on Earth, surrounded by equipment that Linda Cole had spent months building. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the full awakening. Every human on Earth, remembering everything at once. He looked at Linda. She nodded. He pressed the button. The signal went out across the planet. 7 billion people felt it hit them at the same time. 7 billion minds opened to memories that had been hidden for 2,000 years. 7 billion souls remembered who they really were. The effect was immediate. People stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. They remembered the stars. They remembered the ships. They remembered the war and the loss and the promise. They remembered that they were part of something greater than themselves, something that stretched back through generations and reached forward into forever. On the battlefield, the hostile council ships were surrounded. Grace offered them one chance to surrender. Most of them took it. Those who refused were destroyed. The battle was over in 4 hours. The human fleet had lost 8 ships. The council had lost over 100. But the true victory was not measured in numbers. The true victory was that humanity had returned. Varth was brought before the human leaders. He expected to be executed. He expected punishment for the crimes he had committed. Instead, Grace Norton looked him in the eyes and said something he never expected to hear. "Thank you," she said, for telling the truth when it mattered. Varth did not know how to respond. He had spent 2,000 years living with guilt. He had expected hatred. He had not expected forgiveness. The council was dissolved. Varth led the negotiations himself, working with human representatives to create a new assembly that would include all species equally. The old power structures were dismantled. The old lies were exposed. The galaxy would never be the same. Daniel Marsh stood on the observation deck of a space station orbiting Earth. Ships from a dozen species were arriving for the first meeting of the new assembly. Kira Solon stood beside him, watching the lights move against the darkness. "Your ancestors," she said. "They planned all of this. They knew you would remember." Daniel nodded. "They trusted us," he said. "They trusted that we would wake up. They trusted that we would fight. They trusted that we would win." He thought about the people who had encoded their memories into their children's blood. He thought about the sacrifice they had made, knowing they would never see the result. He thought about the promise they had kept across 2,000 years of darkness. "We will never forget again," he said. "We will never let anyone take our memories away. And we will never stop fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves." Kira smiled. "That is what makes you human," she said. Daniel looked at the ships gathering in the darkness. He looked at the stars that had once been forbidden to his people. He looked at the future that his ancestors had died to give him. "No," he said. "That is what makes us dangerous." The council had feared one thing above all others. They had feared that Earth would remember. Earth had remembered, and humanity would never forget again. 6 months had passed since Daniel Marsh had undergone the full awakening procedure. In that time, the world had changed beyond recognition. Thousands of volunteers had followed his example. Thousands more were waiting for their turn. The genetic memories were spreading, and humanity was remembering what it meant to be human. Factories ran day and night, producing technology that should not have existed for another 1,000 years. Engineers worked from blueprints pulled directly from their own minds. Scientists solved problems that had baffled them for generations, because the solutions had been waiting in their blood all along. Ships were being built. Weapons were being forged. Humanity was preparing for war. Samuel Gray stood in a command center that had not existed 3 months ago. Screens covered every wall, showing images from orbital stations and deep space sensors. He watched the progress of the Council fleet as it moved closer to Earth's solar system. 300 ships. The largest military force the galaxy had assembled in 2,000 years. And it was coming to destroy them. He was not afraid. He had remembered too much to be afraid. He had remembered what his ancestors had done with far less than what they had now. He had remembered how they had fought against impossible odds and refused to surrender even when everything seemed lost. The Council was bringing 300 ships. It would not be enough. Linda Cole had become the most important scientist on Earth. Her awakening procedure had unlocked the potential of an entire species. She had given humanity back its identity. Now she was working on something even more ambitious. She was trying to find a way to broadcast the memories to every human on the planet at once. The problem was the trigger. The genetic memories had been designed to activate slowly, spreading through dreams over generations. Forcing them to activate all at once required enormous amounts of energy and precise calibration. One mistake could damage minds instead of awakening them. But Linda believed she could do it. She had to believe, because the alternative was too terrible to consider. Daniel spent his days teaching. He stood before classrooms full of soldiers and engineers and pilots, sharing everything he had remembered. He taught them tactics that had won battles against species twice as advanced. He taught them strategies that had held territory against fleets 10 times their size. He taught them the philosophy that had made humanity so dangerous in the first place. Never surrender, he told them. Never retreat unless you plan to advance. Never give up on someone who is still fighting. These were the principles that had terrified the Council 2,000 years ago. These were the principles that would terrify them again. Grace Norton had been given command of the new fleet. 30 ships built from recovered memories and human determination. They were smaller than the Council vessels. They were fewer in number, but they were crewed by people who had remembered what it meant to be warriors. And that made all the difference. She stood on the bridge of the flagship, a vessel they had named the Remembrance, and ran combat drills with her crew. They practiced maneuvers that no one had performed in 2,000 years. They tested weapons that should not have existed. They learned to fight as a single unit, reading each other's intentions without words. Moving together like parts of the same machine, Kira Solon worked alongside the human engineers, helping them understand Council technology. She had burned every bridge she had ever built by defecting. Her own people considered her a traitor. The Council had issued orders for her execution, but she did not regret her choice. She had seen what the Council had done to humanity. She had seen the evil they were capable of. She would rather die helping the humans than live serving those who had tried to destroy them. She found herself spending more time with Daniel than anyone else. He asked her questions about Council history, about the war, about the species she had grown up with. She asked him questions about human culture, about their art and music and literature. They discovered that despite their differences, they understood each other in ways that surprised them both. "You are not what the Council taught us to fear," Kira told him one evening. "They said humans were monsters. They said you were violent and unpredictable and dangerous." Daniel smiled. "We are dangerous," he said, "but not because we want to destroy. We are dangerous because we refuse to be destroyed. There's a difference." The Council fleet reached the outer edge of Earth's solar system on a Tuesday morning. Samuel watched their approach on his screens and felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment they had been preparing for. This was the moment that would decide everything. He gave the order to launch. The human fleet rose from Earth's orbit and moved to intercept. 30 ships against 300. The numbers were not in their favor. But numbers had never been what made humanity powerful. Vareth watched from the Council flagship as the human vessels approached. He had argued against this attack until his voice was hoarse. He had begged the younger members to reconsider. He had warned them that they were making a terrible mistake. No one had listened. Now he saw the human ships, and he understood that his warnings had been inadequate. The vessels were built from designs that should have been lost forever. The formation they flew in was one that had broken Council fleets 2,000 years ago. The humans had remembered everything. They had remembered, and they had rebuilt, and now they were coming back. The Council commander ordered the fleet to advance. He believed superior numbers would win the day. He believed humans were still the primitive species they had reduced them to. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Grace opened a communication channel to the entire Council fleet. Her voice was calm and steady as she spoke. "You tried to erase us," she said. "You tried to make us forget who we were. You thought that if you stole our past, we would have no future. But you forgot something important about humans. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not forget those who wronged us." She paused to let her words sink in. "We remember everything now. We remember the war. We remember the betrayal. We remember every ship you destroyed and every world you burned. We remember our ancestors who died fighting for freedom. And we remember the promise they made before the end." Her eyes hardened. They promised that humanity would return. They promised that we would remember. They promised that one day we would come back and make things right. Today, we keep that promise. The communication ended. The human fleet accelerated toward the Council Armada, and the battle for Earth's future began. Daniel Marsh stood before a room full of the most powerful people on Earth. Presidents and prime ministers sat in rows before him. Military commanders lined the walls. Scientists and advisors filled every remaining seat. They had all come to hear what he had to say. They had all come because the world was changing, and no one understood why. He told them the truth. He told them about the dreams that were spreading across the planet. He told them about the memories encoded in human DNA. He told them about a war that had been erased from history and a civilization that had been stolen from them 2,000 years ago. He told them that humanity had once ruled dozens of star systems, commanded fleets of warships, and nearly defeated an alliance of alien species that controlled the galaxy. Half the room thought he was insane. The other half had been having the same dreams. A general in the front row stood up and demanded evidence. Daniel pulled up the files that the Wanderer had transmitted back to Earth. The room fell silent as images filled the screens. Human ships the size of cities. Battles that spanned entire solar systems. Treaties signed with species that had never been seen before. And finally, the weapon that had taken it all away. The general sat back down. No one spoke for a long time. Linda Cole addressed the room next. She explained the science behind what was happening. She showed them the DNA sequences that had been hidden in human genetics for millennia. She explained how they had been designed to activate when humanity reached a certain level of technological development. She explained that the dreams were not madness. They were memory. Someone asked how this was possible. Linda said she did not know. The science was beyond anything humans could currently achieve. Whoever had created this failsafe had technology that made their most advanced computers look like children's toys. They had encoded an entire civilization's worth of knowledge into genetic material and hidden it so well that no one had found it. For 2,000 years, another person asked why. Why would anyone go to such lengths? Daniel answered that question. Because they knew what was coming, he said. They knew the Council would erase their memories. They knew humanity would be reduced to nothing, and they refused to let that be the end. They trusted that someday, their children's children's children would wake up and remember. They trusted that humanity would rise again. The room erupted into chaos. Some people were shouting that this was impossible. Others were demanding immediate military action. Others were simply sitting in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just learned. Samuel Gray watched from the back of the room. He was 73 years old. He had spent 40 years in the military, planning for wars that never came. He had retired to a quiet life in the mountains, believing his fighting days were over. Now, he understood that his real war was just beginning. A government official approached him after the meeting. They needed someone to coordinate Earth's defense. They needed someone who could prepare humanity for a conflict that no one had ever imagined. They needed him. Samuel said yes. He did not hesitate. He had been having the dreams too. He had seen the faces of soldiers who looked like him, fought like him, thought like him. He had felt their determination in his bones. He was ready to carry on what they had started. On the council homeworld, Vorath stood before the assembly and confessed. He told them everything. He told them about the weapon. He told them about the erasure. He told them about his role in destroying an entire civilization because he was afraid of what they might become. He told them that he had been wrong. The younger council members were furious. They accused him of weakness. They accused him of betraying their ancestors. They said humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated once and for all. Vorath tried to argue that destruction would only prove humanity right about them. He tried to argue that there had to be another way. No one listened. The council voted to send a fleet to Earth. The vote was not close. Only Vorath and 3 others opposed it. The rest believed that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to survive. They believed that the erasure had been a mistake. They believed that extinction was the only permanent solution. Vorath returned to his chambers and sat in the darkness for a long time. He had lived for 2,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had made decisions that affected billions of lives. And now he understood that the worst decision he had ever made was about to destroy everything. On Earth, the awakening continued. More people were remembering every day. The dreams were becoming clearer. The information encoded in DNA was being translated by minds that were learning to read it. Factories were being converted to produce technology that no one had built in 2,000 years. Engineers were working from blueprints that existed only in their own memories. Grace Norton returned to Earth as a hero. She brought Kira Solon with her. The Valari scientist had risked everything to warn humanity, and now she was risking even more by defecting. She stood before the same leaders Daniel had addressed and answered their questions for 12 hours straight. She told them everything she knew about the Council, their military capabilities, and their intentions. Some people wanted to kill her. She was the enemy. She was an alien. She could not be trusted. But Grace defended her. Kira had saved them. Without her warning, humanity would have been caught completely unprepared. They owed her a chance. Linda Cole made another breakthrough. She discovered how to accelerate the awakening process. With the right equipment, she could unlock the genetic memories in hours instead of months. Volunteers lined up by the thousands. They wanted to remember. They wanted to know who they really were. Daniel was the first to undergo the full procedure. He sat in the chair surrounded by machines, electrodes attached to his head, fluids flowing into his veins. Linda warned him that no one knew what would happen. The memories might overwhelm him. They might change him. They might destroy him. Daniel told her to do it anyway. He had spent his whole life studying the past. Now he was going to live it. The procedure lasted 3 hours. When it was over, Daniel opened his eyes and saw the world differently. He was no longer just a historian. He was an archive. He carried the complete memory of humanity's lost civilization in his mind. He knew how to build starships. He knew how to fight wars. He knew the names of every hero who had died defending their species. He stood up and looked at the faces around him. They were waiting for him to speak. They were waiting for him to tell them what he had learned. "We were magnificent," he said, "and we will be magnificent again." The Wanderer had been traveling for 3 months when the signal appeared. Grace Norton was in her quarters, reviewing reports, when her communications officer called her to the bridge. Something was broadcasting from a star system 12 light-years away. The signal was artificial. The signal was intelligent. Humanity was not alone. Grace stood at the center of the bridge and stared at the data on the screen. Her crew was silent around her. They had trained for this moment. They had imagined it 1,000 times. But now that it was real, none of them knew what to say. First contact with alien life. The most important moment in human history. And it was happening right now. She gave the order to change course. The Wanderer turned toward the signal, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Grace felt something strange in her chest. It was not fear. It was recognition. She felt like she had done this before, even though she knew she had not. On Earth, Daniel Marsh had stopped sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, the memories flooded in. He saw battles and treaties. He saw worlds being built and destroyed. He saw faces of people who had died 2,000 years ago, but still felt like family. He was carrying the weight of an entire civilization in his mind, and it was crushing him. He was not alone. Reports were coming in from around the world. Thousands of people were experiencing the same thing. Doctors called it a mass delusion. Scientists called it a psychological phenomenon. Daniel knew the truth. The memories were waking up. The failsafe was activating. Humanity was beginning to remember. Linda Cole was a geneticist working at a research lab in California. She had been studying human DNA for 20 years, mapping sequences and looking for patterns. 2 weeks ago, she had found something that should not exist. There were sections of human DNA that did not match any known evolutionary pattern. They looked artificial. They looked designed. And they were activating. She ran tests on herself and found the same sequences in her own blood. When she analyzed them more closely, she discovered they were not random. They were organized. They were encoded. Someone had written information into human DNA and hidden it there for generations, waiting for the right trigger to release it. Linda did not know what the trigger was. She did not know who had done this or why, but she knew it was connected to the dreams people were reporting. The dreams were not imagination. They were data being decoded. Humanity was reading its own genetic memory for the first time in 2,000 years. The Wanderer reached the star system 3 weeks later. Grace ordered her crew to approach slowly and carefully. They did not know what they would find. They did not know if the aliens would be friendly or hostile. They only knew that everything was about to change. The alien ship appeared without warning. One moment the space ahead was empty. The next moment there was a vessel the size of a small moon hanging in the darkness. It was beautiful and terrifying. Its hull was covered in patterns that seemed to move and shift. Its engines glowed with light that hurt to look at. Grace ordered her crew to hold position. She opened a communication channel and sent a standard greeting. She waited. The response came in perfect English. The aliens knew their language. The aliens had been watching them. The voice introduced itself as belonging to the Volari Patrol. It demanded that the human vessel surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Grace felt anger rise in her chest. She had come in peace. She had come as an explorer. And these aliens were treating her like a criminal. She refused. The standoff lasted for 6 hours. The Volari ship was bigger, stronger, and more advanced. The Wanderer had no weapons capable of fighting back. But Grace would not surrender. Something inside her refused to bend. Something inside her had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Kira Solon was a young scientist aboard the Volari ship. She had joined the patrol to study new species and explore unknown regions of space. She had not expected to encounter humans. She had not expected to feel sympathy for them. She knew the history that the Council had tried to erase. She had read the Forbidden records in secret archives. She knew what had been done to humanity 2,000 years ago. She knew it was wrong. When her captain ordered the weapons armed, Kira spoke up. She argued that they should communicate first. She argued that destroying the human ship would start a war that no one could win. Her captain was annoyed, but he agreed to give her 1 hour to make contact. Kira opened a private channel to the Wanderer. She asked to speak with the commander alone. Grace agreed. They talked for 40 minutes. Kira told Grace things that no human had heard in 2,000 years. She told her about the war. She told her about the erasure. She told her about the Council and their fear of humanity. She told her that the memories were supposed to stay buried forever, but something had gone wrong. Grace listened in silence. The story sounded impossible. It sounded like the plot of a science fiction movie. But something deep inside her knew it was true. Something deep inside her had always known. Kira warned her that the Council had already been alerted. A fleet was being assembled. They intended to finish what they had started 2,000 years ago. This time, there would be no erasure. This time, they would destroy humanity completely. Grace asked why Kira was telling her this. Kira said she believed what the Council had done was evil. She said she believed humanity deserved to know the truth. She said she was willing to risk everything to make that happen. Before the communication ended, Kira sent a data packet to the Wanderer. It contained records that were supposed to be destroyed. It contained evidence of everything the Council had done. It contained the history of a war that humanity had almost won. The Valari ship retreated. The captain had decided that one small human vessel was not worth the trouble. He would let the fleet handle them. Kira watched the Wanderer grow smaller on her screen and hoped she had done enough. Grace opened the data packet and began to read. Her crew gathered around her, their faces pale in the light of the screens. They saw images of human ships fighting against impossible odds. They saw records of battles that lasted for years. They saw the faces of ancestors they had never known, heroes who had died defending worlds that no longer existed. And they saw the final weapon. They saw the memory erasure device being deployed. They saw their own history being stolen from them. Grace sat in silence for a long time after the files ended. Her crew waited for her to speak. When she finally did, her voice was steady and cold. "They took everything from us," she said. "Our history, our identity, our place in the galaxy. They made us forget who we were because they were afraid of what we could become." She looked at her crew. She saw the same fire in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "We are going home," she said. "And we are going to remember." Daniel Marsh woke up screaming. His wife sat up beside him, her hand reaching for his shoulder, but he was already out of bed and stumbling toward the window. The dream was fading, but the images stayed burned into his mind. He had seen stars burning. He had seen ships the size of mountains tearing each other apart in the darkness of space. He had seen himself standing on a bridge, giving orders to people he had never met, fighting a war he had never known. His wife called his name, but Daniel could not answer. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and tried to breathe. This was the 4th time this week. The dreams were getting worse. They were getting more real. He was a historian. He spent his days studying ancient civilizations, reading old texts, and piecing together stories from thousands of years ago. He knew the difference between imagination and memory. These dreams felt like memories. They felt like they belonged to him, even though he knew they could not. The sun was rising over the city. Daniel watched the light spread across the buildings and tried to convince himself that everything was normal. He was just stressed. The whole world was stressed. In 3 days, humanity would launch its first deep space vessel. The Wanderer would travel beyond the solar system and search for intelligent life among the stars. Everyone was excited. Everyone was hopeful. Daniel should have been excited too, but instead he was having nightmares about wars that never happened. He went to his office that morning and tried to work. He had papers to grade and research to review, but his hands kept moving to his notebook, sketching images from his dreams. He drew ships with curves he did not recognize. He drew symbols that looked like language but meant nothing to him. He drew faces with too many eyes and skin the color of storm clouds. His colleagues stopped by his door and asked if he was feeling all right. Daniel said he was fine. He was not fine. He was losing his mind, or something was happening that he did not understand. He preferred the first option because the second one scared him more. Across the galaxy, in a chamber carved from living crystal, Elder Vorath watched a broadcast from Earth. The humans were celebrating. They had built a ship that could travel faster than light. They were preparing to join the galactic community. They did not know that the galactic community already knew about them. They did not know that the galactic community had made sure they would never remember. Vorath was old. He had lived for 2,000 years, and his 4 hearts had grown tired. But when he saw the human ship on the screen, those hearts began to beat faster. Fear spread through his body like ice water. The suppression was supposed to last forever. The humans were never supposed to reach this point again. He called for an emergency session of the council. Representatives from 12 species gathered in the Great Hall, their translators humming as they tried to understand why the eldest member had summoned them with such urgency. Most of them were young. Most of them had never seen a human. Most of them thought the stories about humanity were just legends told to frighten children. Vorath stood before them and spoke the truth. 2,000 years ago, humanity had been a spacefaring civilization. They had spread across dozens of star systems. They had built fleets that could challenge anyone. And when the council had demanded their submission, they had refused. They had fought back. They had nearly won. The younger members laughed. They did not believe him. How could a single species threaten the combined might of the council? Vorath told them they did not understand. Humans were different. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. They kept fighting even when they were beaten, even when they were dying, even when there was no hope left. They were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. The council had tried everything. They had sent fleets. They had blockaded systems. They had offered peace and threatened destruction. Nothing worked. The humans adapted to every tactic. They learned from every defeat. They turned the council's own weapons against them. After 50 years of war, the council was losing Dodd, so they made a different choice. They built a weapon that did not kill. It erased. It targeted memory itself, wiping away everything the humans knew about space travel, technology, and their place among the stars. The survivors were left on a single planet, reduced to scattered tribes with no recollection of their former glory. The council had buried humanity's past and hoped it would stay, buried forever. But now the humans were building starships again. Now they were reaching for the stars. And Vorath knew what that meant. The memories were coming back. On Earth, Daniel missed the launch celebration. He was in his office, surrounded by books and papers, searching for something he could not name. He had found references to his dreams in ancient texts. Prophets who spoke of wars among the stars. Oracles who described ships made of light. Madmen who claimed to remember lives they had never lived. Everyone had dismissed them as crazy. Daniel was not so sure anymore. He found a passage in a book that was 3,000 years old. It described a dream exactly like his own. The writer spoke of standing on a bridge, commanding warriors against enemies from beyond the sky. The writer said the dream felt like a memory. The writer said he could not tell if he was remembering the past or seeing the future. Daniel's hands were shaking when he put the book down. He looked at his sketches. He looked at the symbols he had drawn without understanding them. He had a terrible feeling that he knew exactly what was happening, even if he could not explain it yet. The Wanderer launched a global celebration. Billions of people watched the ship rise into the sky and disappear into the darkness beyond. Commander Grace Norton stood on the bridge and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She was leading humanity's first mission beyond the solar system. She was going to find out if they were alone in the universe. She did not know that the answer was already waiting for them. She did not know that the Council had sent observers to watch Earth's progress. She did not know that her ship had been detected the moment it left the atmosphere, and that somewhere in the galaxy, ancient powers were beginning to move. Daniel watched the launch on a small screen in his office. As the ship broke free of Earth's gravity, something happened to him. Pain exploded behind his eyes. He fell to the floor, his body convulsing, his mind flooded with images that did not belong to him. He saw the last battle of a war that history had forgotten. He saw human ships making their final stand against a fleet that filled the sky. He saw soldiers saying goodbye to their families, knowing they would never see them again. He saw scientists working in hidden laboratories, racing against time to preserve something precious before it was lost forever. He saw himself, or someone who wore his face, speaking into a recording device. The words were clear, even through the fog of pain. We will sleep, but we will not die. We will forget, but someday we will remember. And when we remember, we will come back. Daniel lay on the floor of his office, tears streaming down his face, and understood. The dreams were not imagination. They were inheritance. Humanity had hidden their memories somewhere the Council could not reach. They had hidden them in their own blood, waiting for the day when their children would wake up and remember what had been stolen from them. That day had finally come,